What's going on, everybody? It's the NFL Week 10 edition of our best bets here at RotoWire. I'm Nick Whalen. He's John McKechnie. We are back for more. John, a rough Week 9 for me overall. 0-2-1. You had a little bit better luck than me. I was just happy to push on the total in that Rams-Saints game, which, once again, we've gotten so lucky on some of these totals. That had no business even pushing. A couple big stops on fourth down by the Rams late in that game. But nevertheless, we're back at it this week. We talked a little bit last week, John, about the rash of favorites winning, favorites covering over some previous weeks. As expected, that did come crashing back down. Favorites had gone 23-5 straight up in week 7 and 8, 21-7 against the spread, just 8-6 straight up last week, 5-8-1 against the number. Had been on a big overrun as well. That started to slip 7-6-1 to the over in week 9. As always, we will give you our favorite 3 plays a piece. Can be a side, can be a total. We'll get into some props. We'll talk some Survivor. Very tricky week in Survivor contests coming up in week 10. And then we'll give you a parlay, we'll give you a teaser, and we'll give you our locks of the week. Jonathan, lead us off. Tell me why the New York Giants are covering 4.5 at the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, all the respect, 4.5. Yeah. So I'll take you guys to the Windy City here first. I want to lead by saying that I just like this number, 4.5. It gives you some good cushion. 4 being the key number. If Giants have a field goal, Bears have a touchdown, we're still within the number. So I like the cushion there. The Bears, you gave a great shout out to Football Reference on your kind of weekly breakdown pod with Jeff. So I wanted to dig into some stuff over there.
Sure.
And in particular about the Bears defense, because the Bengals defense, everyone knows it's bad. The Bears are allowing 6.4 yards per play, which is actually tied with the Bengals for the worst in the league. The Bears are also first in turnover percentage, like 1/5 of opposing drives end in a turnover for the Bears. That doesn't feel sustainable to me. So it feels like the yards per play thing is a lot stickier than the turnovers. So if they're not forcing those turnovers, then we have an issue where they're just giving up chunk after chunk. The Giants have been reasonably good at protecting the ball. They just have 9 turnovers on the season. Obviously not a good week from the Giants last week at home against the 49ers. Thought that would have gone a little bit better. The Bears are 2-0 as favorites this year. And under the direction of Jackson Dart, Giants just 1-2 as a road underdog against the spread. They need to get a little bit better in the red zone, but really, ultimately, this is a bet against the Bears covering a big-ish number. I think it's a big number for them. I don't think they've been favored by more than a field goal anywhere. So I like the G-Men. I'm a big Jackson Dart guy, if you haven't noticed. So I think that he leads the boys into battle and keeps this one close.
I also have a play on this game, John. It is not the Bears. It is not the Giants. It is the over 46.5. And a lot of my handicap here is based on what you just said. I think If you want to go back and watch Bears Bengals, it's actually on NFL Network right now. I was rewatching it just before we started, so fire up the TV and maybe you could catch it. But that was the worst defensive game I've ever seen on both sides. And the Bengals caught most of the heat for that. The Bengals are the team that has the second worst defensive DVOA in the history of DVOA, like 1,400 plus individual defenses in that span, and they are the second worst out of all those. I didn't come away from that game thinking, wow, what a performance by that Bears defense to hold up. Yes, they did force 3 turnovers. They forced a missed field goal all in the fourth quarter of that game. They should have lost, man. They probably should have lost. You could talk about the onside kick, whatever. I didn't come out of that game feeling any better about the Bears defense. And like you said, great numbers on the turnovers, great numbers on the yards per play. 21.2% of opponent possessions are ending in a turnover. I don't think you can count on that to continue. Even if it does, maybe that gives us some more chaos in this game. You get chances for short fields, chances for defensive scores, but those turnovers are covering up what has been one of the worst defenses overall in the NFL this season. Now, why I don't like a side and why I like the over here, John, is because the Giants defense is also terrible and has also given up a ton of points over these last few weeks. 34, 38, 33 over the last 3 games. Giants are 29th in EPA per play. They're 26th in success rate, dead last in the NFL in EPA per rush on defense. Bears, as you mentioned, 30th in success rate, 29th in opponent completion rate. So I think this should be a decent spot for Jackson Dart. That Giants run defense in particular has been the problem. That's where I kind of trust the Bears a little bit more here because for the most part, they are winning these games on the ground. I think Caleb Williams has been fine, but he's not the reason that they're sitting at 5-3 right now. It's been DeAndre Swift. It was Kyle Monangai last week. Sounds like Swift is going to be back for this game. Either way, you kind of have a two-headed monster now in that backfield. But once again, that Bears defense, man, they've given up the second most explosive plays in the NFL this season, plays of 20-plus yards, behind only Cincinnati. Jackson Dart, second in the NFL in ADOT. Even without Malik Neighbors, without Cam Scatterbu, like this Giants team just keeps finding ways to score. I don't know how they do it. They marched right down on the first drive last week, found one of the tight ends who they have like 4 white tight ends who all look the same. And even late in games, like they're putting up points in second halves. They're getting blown out, but a lot of these games are close for 2 or 3 quarters. I don't think the Bears really have blowout potential here. I think both teams are scoring all 4 quarters, and I think we go way over 46.5. All right, so that checks off play number 1 for both of us. Let's head out to the NFC West, John. You're looking at Seahawks Cardinals.
This is an interesting one, and I fear that I'm a bit of like a prisoner of the moment when it comes to the Cardinals, although I'm one of the people that is unable to watch ESPN right now. Thanks a lot, Disney. So I didn't really catch much of the Cardinals game on Monday night, and I know, any sort of offensive performance needs to be taken with a grain of salt when it comes against the Cowboys defense. However, I do feel like this Arizona offense has just largely turned a corner. It fits what Jacoby Brissett does a little bit better than what it had been under Kyler Murray. I mean, when these two teams squared off, I think like week 4 on that Thursday night game, it was kind of a rock fight. It was an ugly game. And the Cardinals were in it, even with like a kind of an inability to do much on offense. I think that the offense kind of gets out of its own way a little bit more with Brissett. I know that the Seahawks have a very good case of being argued as the best team in the NFC right now, and certainly in the NFC West. But I don't know. And I know that the Cardinals are also at a bit of a rest disadvantage. But ultimately, 6.5. It's a pretty sizable number that Seattle's going to have to clear. I would have to imagine that a lot of the money is pouring in on Seattle, and yet the number is still sticking at 6.5. So I'm gonna go ahead and ride with this Cardinals team, and I think sneakily the Cardinals defense. Mario Puig was making some great points on our NFL preview show pod earlier today about this Cardinals defense. They're getting guys back. The secondary is starting to gel. The front 7, the pass rush. Getting after it a little bit here. So I think that this is a good spot to back the Cardinals with some points. I would consider the over as well, because it's just sitting at 44.5. If the Cardinals do kind of go by the wayside here, Seattle's probably putting up a good number of points. But ultimately, give me the Cards and some points.
Yeah, I like that you're taking this game on. This is one that I kind of wanted to jump on, and honestly, I couldn't settle on a side. Like you talk about being a prisoner of the moment with Arizona. I think if you're on Seattle, it's kind of the same, right? It's like, oh, this team's a wagon. All they're doing is just beating up teams. They put up 31 in the first half the other night against Washington. Like it's kind of 2 teams, I guess, that are both trending in the right direction. And we do have to keep in mind, Arizona had lost 5 in a row prior to taking care of the Cowboys. And, I know you said you didn't watch much of that game. The Arizona defense is what stuck out to me. It wasn't, oh my God, what an otherworldly performance by Jacoby Brissett, because my God, is that Cowboys defense just terrible. I mean, wide open receivers, poor tackling throughout the entire night. Somehow Marvin Harrison had his career high with 7 catches. How has he not had more than 7 catches in a game so far? But he got active early in that one. It's a huge step up in class going from that Dallas defense to Seattle. And that's kind of what worries me on the Arizona side. But we also saw Arizona play like 3 disastrous quarters last time these teams matched up, and then still make that game close. Seattle ended up winning on a walk-off field goal. It feels like there's kind of a strong case for either team here, and I think that's a kind of a good market to jump into if you have a strong lean. And 6.5 feels a little heavy for a divisional game.
I think so too. And then, you go back to some of these other Cardinals games. Yes, they were on that long losing streak, but they pushed good teams to the brink. I believe they must have covered in those instances, both against Indianapolis. The Indianapolis game almost gave me a heart attack, because I was on Indianapolis in Survivor that week. Packers game was very close as well. So Cardinals, I don't expect them to go in there and win. It's going to say a lot if they do, but keeping it close seems to be their MO right now against good teams. That's good enough for me with 6.5.
Okay, there we have it. Put it on the card. As usual, John, I got like 4 or 5 that I'm choosing between. I'm terrified to pick the wrong one. Nevertheless, we are going into what may be the ugliest game of the week. Apologies to Jags
Yes.
Texans. I'm not touching that one. Give me the Cleveland Browns, the road favorite. Cleveland Browns catching 1.5 on the road at the Jets. This is an alarming number. Seeing the Browns as a road favorite, seeing the Browns as a favorite in general is just something you don't see very often. It reminds me a little bit of the Browns' spot against the Dolphins earlier this season, where you're going into that one and it's like, all right, the Browns defense against that bad Dolphins team, this should be a walkover game. I think I still convinced myself to at the very least Miami would keep that game close. They did not. What worries me here is what direction does this Jets team go? Like you sell off your 2 best pieces on defense by far in Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. I think that can either crush a locker room. It, in some ways, could galvanize a locker room. It's tough timing because you're coming off a bye and you're coming off your only win before that bye. It's like the only momentum you've had all season now, to me, feels like it's been squashed because you're basically giving up on the season, which realistically, the season was over like 3 weeks in. I think the Jets did the right thing, cashing in, considering the packages that they got. But this was already a bad defense. It was a defense that was 31st in the NFL in pressure rate. Now you're taking Sauce away from that. You're taking Quinnen Williams, especially, away from that. I think this plays into the hands of the Cleveland Browns, who don't want to have Dylan Gabriel do a whole lot here. I think this becomes a more appealing matchup for Gabriel, but really it's about just pounding Quinshon Judkins. Looks like he's going to be okay coming out of the bye, had that shoulder injury. I think the Browns are better equipped to win a game like this. I think they make fewer mistakes. And the one unit that we can count on in this game is ultimately the Browns defense. So I know it feels like, the Jets kind of have some lingering momentum coming out of that win. We also need to remind ourselves, it was the Cincinnati Bengals defense. It was the second worst defense in the history of the modern NFL. This is a huge, huge jump now facing the Cleveland Browns.
And the Jets needed to go fully into their bag of tricks to come back in that fourth quarter too. Like it wasn't like they were just scoring at will all afternoon in that one. So yeah, I feel like this is a great spot for the Browns. I mean, the Browns have a great rushing attack with Judkins in there, and you take away like the one kind of like steadying piece of that defensive front for the Jets in Quinnen Williams. That to me is a much bigger problem in this matchup than Sauce Gardner's absence. Just given that we don't really expect Dylan Gabriel to do a ton unless Kevin Stefanski does the weird, he's going to throw it 50 times again. Yeah. I don't think he'll make that mistake again. And yeah,
well, he's not calling plays anymore.
Oh, thank God. On top of it all, I'm with you here on the Browns, but this one is, that one clocked to me more of like a stay away, but I appreciate you walking right into the mud.
Yeah, I did read there are some trends about, these teams who sell at the deadline, the line moves against them. Those teams are covering at closer to a 60% rate. So I'm, this is not the Nick Whalen 5-star lock of the year for the cure by any means, but give me the Browns. Give me the Cleveland Browns to win this game on defense. All right, John, we both like the Detroit Lions as our third pick, so lead us off.
Well, not much to say here other than, the Washington's, they're in a spot where their pets' heads are falling off. Like Jaden Daniels gets hurt, in a spot where it's pretty debatable as to whether he should have even been in that game. Terry McLaurin, obviously, as well, is a really old roster, and it looks it too. Like last year they were kind of this amazing story. This year it looked like they got old fast, whereas like last year is kind of like a fountain of youth thing, sparked by Jaden Daniels, but you have that. So like I'm already kind of willing to pick against the Commanders like as a principle right now. I don't know if like Vegas is caught up to how bad they are. Maybe that's a dangerous thing to say. Then additionally, God, what a bad time to be catching the Lions. I mean,
yeah.
after last week, you don't think that they're going to be like going and throwing haymakers in Washington, who's down right now? I think this could get really nasty for Washington here. They would need kind of like several turf monsters to rise up and help their cause here, because I think the Lions, if this goes the way I'm expecting, they roll and they cover this one with ease, which is, again, always a dangerous sentiment. And it feels strange. Like, has this line kind of bounced around? Like, wasn't it somewhere around 9.5 earlier this week? Now it's 7.5 at DraftKings. So that has my antenna up just a bit, but nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and push forward and say that the Lions cover that 7.5.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. It was mostly 8.5. I think we saw some 9s earlier in the week. Now some 7.5s. I think that's some of these injuries on the offensive line, perhaps for the Lions. Penei Sewell, Dan Skipper, Taylor Decker, all on the injury reports as of Wednesday and Thursday. So I think that could be part of it. It's hard for me to see like what is the case for Washington here. Again, a very dangerous statement to say into a camera here. Like, how could the Commanders possibly cover this number? But you laid it out well, man. The first thing I had written in my notes is like the worst thing that could have happened for Washington was Detroit losing last week. Like, you don't want to be catching the Lions at all. You definitely don't want to be catching them off of a straight up loss and just a total letdown game against Minnesota. Their two prior losses this season. Of course they get shellacked by the Green Bay Packers in week 1, put up 52 the next week on the Chicago Bears, lost that game to Kansas City, and then just shut down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Won that game 24-9. And that was not even a great offensive game for Detroit. Part of it for me, obviously, it's kind of your season's over for Washington. It was over before Daniels got hurt, but that was just a hammer that you didn't need on top of this. But the Washington defense has also just completely crumbled. Like, we could talk about Marcus Mariota starting this game. I actually don't think he's that bad of a backup, but the defense has given up 400 plus in 3 straight games. It's a bottom 5 defense in terms of EPA per play. It's one of the worst defenses, or pass defenses, I should say, in football. And you lost Marshawn Lattimore for the year. Not that he was playing well, but he's probably better than whatever replacement level cornerback you're bringing in. So I think all the trends point to Detroit here. Goff and Campbell, 21-8 ATS after a loss. They've obviously won 12 in a row in this spot. It's got to be Lions, man. I'm not backing off Detroit after one bad game. All right, so since we doubled up on this one, John, is there any game that almost made your card?
I thought about the Ravens Vikings under because it's an inflated number. It's 49.5.
I agree.
I think that this defense is going to pose problems for Baltimore's offense. We've seen Brian Flores kind of put Lamar Jackson in tough spots before, dating back to his, when Flores was down in Miami. So I think that there's a factor there. And I also just don't see a JJ McCarthy offense scoring a ton of points either. And I do think the Ravens defense is still not great by any means, but the addition of Alohi Gilman has kind of freed up Kyle Hamilton to do more stuff. They make the trade for Draymond Jones, kind of shore up the front seven just a little bit. They're still not going to be able to rush the passer much. So that there is that, but the Vikings just haven't been able to run the ball like whatsoever. And I think that the overall collection of talent in the Baltimore secondary is going to be able to kind of hold serve against McCarthy overall. Nate Wiggins, Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, like the list goes on. Even Awuzie is having a good year. So I think ultimately, like we're in for a bit of a defensive battle. That's probably not where Baltimore wants to be necessarily. So I'd be open to the idea of Minnesota covering the 4.5, but more so, I think that this is a low scoring game. I'd see us going under 49.5.
I like that read quite a bit. Honestly, I was kind of toying with taking Vikings plus 4.5. I'm still not sold on Baltimore. I mean, they're 4-3-and-outs in the first half against Miami. I know it's Lamar coming off of a month-long absence. They're probably being conservative with him. I totally understand that, but it's just tough because we've seen probably Minnesota's best defensive game and worst defensive game over the last 2 weeks. And I don't know which version of the Vikings is going to show up, but I don't think this is going to be a laugher by any means. I think Minnesota makes this a game, and I'm with you. I think it is lower scoring. Let's talk a little Survivor, John. This is a very uncomfortable week. This is the first time all year for me between my various Survivor pools where I'm clicking on a team and I just don't feel good about it at all. I'm not saying I haven't lost entries because I have, but I felt good about those picks going into the week. This week, not so much. I've already burned Denver. I burned Buffalo. I burned Indy in my most important Survivor pools. So that means I'm looking at Seattle. I might be looking at that Carolina team. I could be looking at the Chicago Bears. It's going to be rough out there. Decent chance that you have, one of Denver, Buffalo, or Indy remaining. I would feel pretty good about those, probably in that order, maybe Buffalo ahead of Denver. But man, it's going to get a little bit messy. 65% of the field in the Circa contest this past week was on the LA Rams. That is easily the highest number we've seen on one team this season. About 20% of the entries were on the LA Chargers. We did lose about 12% of the field on the Green Bay Packers. 264 entries went out on Green Bay. 15 went out on Detroit, 8 on Dallas, 1 on the Houston Texans. So in Circus Survivor, that leaves us now with 1,769 active entries, implied value of just over $10,500. The Grandissimo contest, the $100,000 version of Circus Survivor, entered week 9 with 13 entries alive. 2 went down on the Green Bay Packers. The other 11 were distributed between the Rams and the Chargers. So nice little implied value of $627,273. Do you still have your Grandissimo entry?
I went out on the Panthers in week 1. Did they?
Oh man, yeah. Someday, John, we will enter Circuit Grandissimo. So looking at this week, I mean, Denver widely projected to be the most popular play. Carolina next, then Buffalo, then Seattle, then Detroit. And keep in mind, this is factoring in the likelihood that you have some of these teams available. Let's say you've used Denver, you've used Buffalo, you've used Detroit. Where do you turn next year? Do you trust the Bears? Doesn't sound like it. Do you trust Carolina? Are there any other sneaky spots on this slate?
So I'm in a survivor pool with some people where if you're still alive at this stage of the season, you need to pick 2 teams.
Oh, goodness.
So it's rough out there, and especially because it's been kind of a chalky year for the most part. I feel like we usually get more carnage by now. I've used great teams like the Bills and the Packers and the Lions and stuff like that. So my options are pretty limited. I did fail to burn the Broncos in week 1 against the Titans, so they are still available to me. But irregardless, for this particular pod, so I have the Panthers punched in as my second team, and I feel so queasy about it. I really don't know what to do there. You can't really touch Patriots Bucks. Like, you can't touch that Rams Niners game. Again, use the Lions already. You can't. I have the Chargers available, and I kind of like them in the spot, but the way that their offensive line is completely crumbled against that pass rush that kind of won them the game last week, that feels like you're walking into something scary. So ultimately, just pray for the best, because you are going to have to hold your nose this week and pick a team that traditionally you would not want to have to mess with whatsoever. You almost wish that you'd gone out earlier before having to pick these teams. But again, I ramble, but Panthers are my kind of secondary choice this week if you have to.
So Panthers over Seahawks?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm scared for the Seahawks here. Right. I think maybe a little bit of air comes out of the balloon. I'm still a big believer in the Seahawks, but Cardinals might get them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that just underscores what kind of week we're looking at here. Obviously, if you have the Colts available, that could be a spot as well, but you got the Germany game. I mean, the Falcons almost tied the game in the fourth quarter against New England. We'll take that, I suppose, if you're Atlanta. Did cover. Shout out to Parker Romo, missing a pretty big extra point in the fourth quarter that prevented that game from getting away from New England. All right, John, let's take a look at the prop market. We're doing this video on Thursday this week. We got a much better market than we did a week ago. I'll let you lead us off. What do you like?
All righty. So let's go with Oronde Gadsden over 49.5 receiving yards. You can get that at BetMGM. I think I like him up into the mid-50s. The Steelers ranked 30th against opposing tight ends in fantasy production. I know that's more than just yards. However, I think it's a pretty strong sentiment that the Steelers bad against the tight end. Gadsden getting fed more and more. If Herbert has to get rid of the ball, his ADOT is just 8 yards down the field. So he's one of those first options that come available. Love Gadsden here over 49.5. I'm going to cut the other way on another tight end. Give me Luke Musgrave under 33.5 receiving yards. I think that your initial inclination is just going to be, he's just going to have the Tucker Kraft role. He's not nearly as good as Tucker Kraft. This offense is going to look a lot different down the stretch without Tucker Kraft. Musgrave can't do what Kraft was doing. He can't do that same stuff after the catch either. I think you're going to be, if you're holding the over here, even at a tantalizing 33.5 yards, I think you're going to be sorely disappointed. Plus, Philly ranks 3rd against opposing tight ends. And then this one's more of an easy one, riding the gravy train. Quinshot Judkins has been so good to me this year. High number, 88.5 rushing yards, but no Quinnen Williams, kind of dead in the water Jets team. I will take over 88.5 rushing yards for Judkins. And then 3 anytime touchdowns for you. I love the value here. Drake London plus 140. Maybe I get whipsawed a little bit. He scores 3 touchdowns last week. Maybe he gets 0, but plus 140, I'm willing to take the gamble. I'm going to keep going back to Jackson Dart until morale improves. That guy, especially with no Cam Scatterbo, I feel like he's their best red zone option. as far as carrying the ball goes, you can get it almost 2-1, plus 195. And then how often do you see this? Lamar Jackson to score a touchdown, plus 250? He only has one this year. You think he's going to end the season with just one? I don't. I think Lamar gets in there, and I love that number, plus 250.
There we go. I like that, John. I also have some for Jackson Dart, over 1.5 touchdown passes, plus 134. Bears have given up 20 passing touchdowns in 8 games. That's the most among teams that have already had a bye. Only Cincy and Dallas have given up more this season. Also like the over 38.5 rushing yards for Jackson Dart. Bears 30th in yards per carry allowed to quarterbacks. Give me Josh Downs, over 38.5 receiving yards. This one's just kind of off the board, but just a really low number for Downs. Like, even if Michael Pittman plays, which I think he's going to this week, I just want pieces of that Colts offense. I think they're going to move the ball just fine on Atlanta. Really low number on Downs. Jahmyr Gibbs, over 22.5 receiving yards. Hasn't had really the monster fantasy season that we thought. Couple splash games here and there. They haven't been using him quite as much as a pass catcher. I think they go back to that this week, take advantage of that Washington defense. I also have Arondé Gadsden, over 4.5 receptions. You mentioned some of the numbers with that Pittsburgh defense. They're giving up over 6 receptions per game to tight ends, one of the highest yards per target figures in the NFL. Gadsden averaging about 6 for 94 over the last 4 games with 2 touchdowns. And give me Rachaad White, over 20.5 receiving yards. We're going to hear a lot about this New England run defense. It is very good. I think we can also question the opponent quality when we look at that. New England has allowed by far the most running back receptions this season. They're giving up over 6 catches per game to running backs, most targets to running backs on the year, second highest catch rate to the position. White's already gone over this number in 4 of his last 5 games without Bucky Irving. Does not look like we're going to get Bucky Irving out there this week for the Bucs. And then my anytime touchdowns, Quinshon Judkins, minus 130. Zach Charbonnet, plus 130. Sam Laporta, plus 140. Devontae Adams, minus 125. If you think you can make it a 3rd straight week with multiple touchdowns, you could get that at plus 475 at DraftKings. Jalen Hurts, plus 135. Another running quarterback at plus money. And then Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers, still hanging on to one of the highest red zone target rates among receivers in the NFL. That pays plus 190. All right, John, I will give us a parlay and a teaser. I assume you will be simply parlaying your 3 favorite picks.
We'll do those 3, and then we'll also package the so we'll make it 4 legs. Give me the Ravens Vikings under 49 as well.
All right, there we go. I just got a straight money line parlay for us this week. Give me the Browns money line. Give me the Jags money line. If you can't beat Davis Mills, then, the Jags are the Jags. And give me the Eagles money line on Monday night. I don't like what I've seen from this Green Bay team. I think this is a bad spot for the Packers. That one pays plus 588. All right, that'll do it for our best bets for NFL Week 10. Check out all of our content over at RotoWire.com, including the player props tool. That is where we start every week when we come up with these props for you. You can go check that out. You can check out our new start sit tool. If you got some lineup decisions to make in your fantasy leagues, just put in the code YouTube15. You see it right there on your screen. YouTube15, put that in at RotoWire, 15% off anything we offer.